So it's really interesting that there's more information coming out about possible other days that we are going to get raptured. The reality is, I don't know about you guys, but I felt really burned out after this third watch. And I was thinking, man, it's just not going to come. And then, of course, more information comes out. And, and I think it's really interesting. It feels at the moments that we are like receiving manna, the food in the desert as we're going through this Exodus. That's what it really feels like. Because when I get burned out, God shows me something or somebody else shows me something. And I'm like, okay, can I take another step forward? Can I do this? I think a lot of us are just really feeling this. And here's what I find ironic about all of this is that I've gotten to the point where I really have to decide, hey, look, I really believe Jesus is coming, or I can't look at any of this at all. And I think this is the real shifting. It's like, okay, when you go to, when you go and you keep the real shifting of the tares and the wheats, where it just keeps in science. What do we call it? We keep distilling it through one process, through another process, and then it just keeps going through phase until it's really truly formed impurity. And I think that's really interesting because the more we are, it's truly purifying. This morning, I woke up for the first time and I was like, God, you put me in a situation where a year in January, I made my first $100,000, and then you took it away from me. And you gave me a real relationship before then. You took that away from me. You gave me a real job that I really liked before then in the Middle East, and you said, no, that's not where I want you. You gave it to me and took it away, and you showed me, and God has truly showed me what is important. And I've gotten to the point where I woke up and I said, you know what, God, the things that are idols in my life, you're showing me what is an idol. Money is an idol through the horse world. The relationships were my idols, things like this. And now you've kind of and now that I never asked. I always knew that the rapture was going to happen. I didn't know if it was ever going to happen in my lifetime. I don't know any of this stuff. But I've always kind of warned my mother about it, and she said, well, it has never come, and so I don't think it's just going to come when it's going to come. And I found the wisdom in that, and I think it's really fascinating. But I never really, dwelled deep into it. I looked at it a few times last year thinking, and I even said it to a friend of mine. I was kind of trying to, even said, to her, I think the rapture is going to be coming soon, just as an off thought, not even really thinking. She's like, well, I hope it doesn't because I've got blah blah blah. And I was thinking at that point I thought, well, it's a free ticket for your kids to go to heaven. And I didn't realize just how far based off she was about, if you're not excited about the rapture, and this is a person that goes to church, prays, and does all this stuff. I'm thinking, well, and I'm not trying to judge anyone's relationship with Christ, but I'm thinking, why wouldn't you want to be excited about the rapture? If you start getting to know God and start getting excited about the things that He has coming, and we know, even in the Bible, it says that no man can, comprehend or whatever. I think it's Paul or somebody is talking about how much better it is when we die, because it's an upgrade into a world. And that from all the near-death experiences, I've learned that, the phrase I've kind of learned is that on earth we exist to live, in heaven we live to exist. And I truly am starting to believe that now, and how much better it is, and how all these near-death experiences, they have these groups of people that come together that are because they've felt and tasted a slice of heaven, come together, and then come back, once they came back to earth, and kind of developed these support groups, because it was that the difference between earth and heaven was that extreme, where they're really depressed and did not want to go back. And so when my friend, who I absolutely adore, and she meant the world to me when she said that, and I was like, oh, You know, like, now I think of it as maybe her relationship wasn't as strong as I thought it was. But everyone's got their own walk, and I've had my walk, and I know I've been very weak on some days with Christ, where I've said things where people have literally said to me, like, I hope everything's all right with you because I feel like you're going down a dark path. I'm like, no, I'm not going down a dark path, but a dark day doesn't mean a dark, doesn't, you know, what is it? A bad day doesn't mean a bad life, right? And I think spiritually, we all go through this roller coaster. And anyhow, the reason why I label this, we are in the waiting, the irony in the waiting is that we, this process, it truly is a process. And as we're getting to this fourth watch and more things are coming out, again, I don't know where all this stuff is coming out. I'm starting to see that you really have to be invested into this rapture deal in order for God to, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really going to be, this thing is real, and it really is for those that are really invested into it, and it's not for the faint of hearts. And so I'm gonna do two things, and I find this very ironic because I had to get to the point where I'm like, you know what? I think there's two raptures coming up, and hear me out before you jump to the conclusion of two raptures coming up. Your own personal self-rapture, because I woke up and I said, you know what, God, I surrender. I just want to serve you at this point. I don't want the idols in my life. I want you to be my God. And it took me through these three watches just to simply say, you know what, I don't know what's going on fully. I see, but at the same time, I am completely surrendering to you. So whether the rapture does come or not, at this point, it doesn't matter because I've got my heart postulated towards the attitude that you are God, that you are, if you want this for me, you'll make it happen. If you want this for me, you'll make that happen, and whatever. And in certain sense, that is, I feel like I want to call it my first rapture, my spiritual rapture. And the irony is, now that I'm spiritually raptured from this world where I can focus on God, then I can now be physically raptured. And I hope you guys can relate. I don't want to think it's just me, but I really feel like, and this is what I'm talking about, the refining, where the process through the science, when to get a pure element, you have to, burn it and then evaporate it, and then it becomes whatever pure, element that you want it to be. And I think it's taking 4 processes, maybe even more. I'm not sure. But now I'm starting to understand that I'm starting to feel genuinely the process of being refined. And then I love the analogy, and it didn't click with me until this morning, like when this process started with me. And this process started with me, ironically, 2 years ago with the whole rapture thing. When I was in a race, and there's a 4-horse pileup, bomb, 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 and I was the 3rd horse. And in this race, I saw the accident coming, and I let go of the reins, because just like when you're driving, you just want to relax your body. No different than on a horse. My eyes are closed, and I feel my body bouncing in between horses, boom, 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 and then I wake up, and I'm in the infield, and I crawl underneath the rail, and I see one dead horse here, and I see another dead horse here, and I also see what's interesting is I also see a rider knocked out here, a rider knocked out, and it felt like I just woke up out of a war movie, like, and I'd never been in an accident like that before, where in that race, 2 horses died, and then the outrider horse died, and it was kind of devastating, sad, and that was, I want to say, yeah, that was last year of February. And we're almost to the end of this year. And that is really where this process started. And the reason why I want to say that is because you guys have been showing me, and here's the irony, is I went to Florida. Some of you guys may have watched my other video, and you saw me driving without my seatbelt, which, thank you for the heads up on that. But I went to Florida, and I said, God, if you're really coming, I'm going to go, as I'm going through Florida, I'm going to Destin, Florida. Now, for those people that love Destin, hi, how you guys doing? I love Destin too. It's probably one of my favorite places in Florida. because of the boats and stuff. And so I said, Lord, I want, if you can confirm it to me, that this whole boat thing that I'm hearing about the rapture is really, truly out there, that the boat thing seems to be coming out, and even I love boats. I'm a big fan of boats, but in fact, I was planning to be a boat mechanic. At first, I was doing an aviation thing, and then I realized I didn't want the real liability of having a midnight shift of working for 12 hours and then having someone sign off, and then if I accidentally left a wrench, and then what if it's my fault if the plane, I just didn't want that kind of responsibility of even though you can become very good at it. I didn't want, I get tired, and if I get tired, like when I'm tired, I'm just like, I'm no better than a drunk, essentially. So I don't want to put myself in a position where if somebody's plane failed in the sky, where are you going to pull over? You're not going to pull over. You're just going to go straight down. Well, you might glide down, if you have a good captain. But at least on a boat, if the engine breaks, if the engine breaks, at least you're out at sea where you have a chance to survive. And not only that, with horses, if horses break down, it depends on how bad of a breakdown is. You just turn them out in the field and let God do its thing. Let the horse heal up, or you retire them or whatever. So I just didn't want to. Aviation mechanic was kind of out of the question. The long story short is I asked God for my own confirmations, and because I'm always asking Him for confirmations, because I'm always doubting. It's just my nature, to doubt. But at the same time, there's a hunger in me that says, no, let's keep going. So I'm like doubting. I'm literally doubting as I'm putting every step forward, but I'm still putting every step forward. So I'm in Destin 2 days ago as I'm driving, and it's sunset, and I said, God, if I see a ship on the horizon, I know you're coming soon. And I was hoping, and I said, please make it a cruise ship. Well, I get there, and I park my truck and my trailer, and then I walk down to the beach, and surely enough, it was not a cruise ship, but it was a ship, and it looked like one of those rescue ships that if you were to be rescued, like Coast Guard ship. It was just like the Coast Guard ship out there, and I don't know if it was a fishing ship or a Coast Guard ship, but it looked, out in the distance. It was right on the horizon where the sun was setting, and it was right on the horizon. And I thought, okay, this ship looked like, it was far enough for me to not be able to distinguish what it looked like, but I knew it wasn't a cruise ship because I knew it was smaller than that. And it looked way more like a rescue ship than anything. And so, and I thought, well, maybe God didn't answer my prayer. Or maybe He did. And long story short, I found it very ironic that my first rapture, whether is the purifying of who I am as a person, getting me ready for this wedding. That's, I don't know about you guys, but this has truly felt more like a roller coaster ride. And I think the conclusion of this whole ride is us getting purified and really shifting the wheat from the whatever analogy you want to use, but the real refining of us, all of us as Christians. Now, on that same token, the reason why I brought up my racing career starting 2 years ago is when I broke down, is because I had I broke my hand. I've been so blessed in the racing world to never, the first thing jockeys do when they break down, all of them, you can ask any of them, what is the first bone you break? Anybody in the audience? No? Anybody? Okay. I'm going to just tell you guys, it's usually the clavicle right here. I've never broken my clavicle. I've never broken anything. And the one time I did break something, it wasn't really a break. It was like a minor fraction, or not a minor fraction. It was just like it was when I was first learning and I was putting too much pressure on my hands, learning to gallop the wrong way, because you don't want, if you're putting that much pressure on your hands the wrong way. But anyways, I had split one of my bones, and it was a very like hairline fracture that took me out for like just a month. so it wasn't a big deal. But I've never had an accident in the horse racing world, which is unbelievable. But the one accident I do have happens to break my fingers. And so for 3 days, I'm there in there in my dorm room on the track, and for some reason, I get this strong urge to write a book. This idea comes out, and long story short, I'm not here to sell the book or anything, but I want you, because I truly feel that the rapture is going to come here, if not this month, this year. Everything points to 2025. To me, it doesn't make sense if it goes after 2026, but you know, God is giving us the manna, and things are getting more and more, making more and more sense as the way it is. But I think it's October for us, guys, and then we're out of here. And it's just my opinion, but this is how I'm seeing things. So instead of trying to sell you the book, I'm going to tell you, this is the biggest significance. I'm going to tell you what the book is on. The book is on this guy, and he's a pirate. Not this guy. This guy is one of the main. There's two main guys. The bottom line of the book is that these guys have they're two enemies. You've got one pirate and you got one captain. And I'm just gonna tell you guys flat out how this book ends, because I know I'm not gonna have enough time to write the rest of it. If we're raptured this month, I'm not gonna be able to write the ending. And the ending is the best part of the book. But the idea is that I think God started putting the idea of the whole boat thing in my head with unconsciously, and the end of the world. Because what it is originally I wanted to name this book, the name of the book is called Crossbones. It's called A Dead Man's Riddle. I originally wanted to name it Davy Jones's Locker. But Davy Jones's Locker, if you read the book, if you would have figured out that would have been a dead giveaway. These two guys, I'm going to put it this way. These two guys are James and Edwards start off as friends, and then they become bitter enemies through a girl named Emma. And Emma starts dating Edwards when they're young, and she breaks off with him because Edwards turns out to be a real, I don't want to say douchebag, but a real egocentric. He becomes the how do you call it? He's like the worst boss you ever had, but very successful, and he takes it into his relationships, and it just makes for horrible. What do you call it? He makes a really good businessman, but really bad in relationships because he's very crooked. And so, anyways, and Emma is affected by the relationship, and the younger is to the point where she just turns her life completely to God, and that's her reaction. Edwards, when they break up, he goes and he says, and then he has a bad experience through the academy, and he just goes completely the opposite. And James is best friends with Edwards at the time, and James has no idea that Edwards was dating Emma, and Emma finds James on the road, and that's how they meet. They meet at a market, and they fall in love with each other. And Emma never really tells James about Edwards, and Edwards never tells James about Emma. And so as this goes on, they go to the academy together, and then this kind of comes out, and then they become bitter enemies, and so they get in a sword fight at the academy, which puts more bitterness between them, because the academy kind of says, okay, James and Edwards are the two top students, and they need to but the problem is that they're in this clash, and so they end up giving they're at the Naval Academy, and they end up giving them military punishments. And I'm not as good as talking as I am as writing, so I'm a far better writer. So long story short, they become bitter enemies from early in their academic years. But here's the thing: is as James's life progresses, he becomes one of the top naval commanders for the British Army, and for the British for the naval British, because this is set back in the 18th century. And James becomes one of the top. Edwards becomes the top pirate. In fact, he is so good, he is better than Blackbeard in the thing. And he becomes to the point where England has to stop the 7-year war with France and all this stuff, because they have to go chase him down. Well, Edwards gets really clever, and he somehow manages to divert all of this attention off him because all his other pirate guys are dying. And through his diversion and getting England off his back and France off his back, he becomes what is known as a pirate con. And pirate con is something that an enemy must bestow. You do something so magnificent that your enemies give you the title of a pirate con. If you guys study Genghis Khan till this day had the biggest empire known. So I gave Edwards the best title that you could as a pirate con, and you'll find out just how clever Edwards really is on getting rid of his and a lot of this I truly felt was divine. This is something I could not write on my own because I try to write stories, but every part of this book just started coming to me like somebody else is giving me the information. Long story short, the book starts out with a riddle at the beginning of the book, and James is on this island, and he has to go hunt down Edwards McMahon. That's the name of this pirate con, and which is obviously his old rival, because England got so fed up with this pirate that they sent their best admiral, Juan Santos. And so James, and when Juan Santos disappears, James is the one that they find to charge him to go find him. Long story short, I'm trying to best describe this without getting into too many details because I want to get straight to the meat of it. They find themselves on this island that's so forbidden and whatever that, but it's a strange island, and nothing seems to work the way you would think it would work on the island. And so James and Edwards find themselves having to work with each other because there's a storm up ahead, and it's a storm of it's worse than anything. And as each storm comes, Edwards finds himself, he is the best pirate navigator. I don't want to say pirate navigator, but he is the best what makes him such a successful pirate is he's able to use the storms for his gain, and that's how he knocks out a lot of his enemies. And I'm going to give you guys a lot of details away is simply because I don't think I'm going to ever be able to write the other half of how it ends, so I'm just going to tell you the ending flat out. But anyways, Edwards becomes so good, he uses the sea to fight on his behalf. Essentially, he knows how to navigate the storms, but in this strange island that Santos comes to die at with the riddle, Edwards is realizing it's a very different island in the sense that it repeats. It's a cycle on the island, and it repeats, and it's James goes to the island, and Edwards, the first couple cycles, kills James. And it sounds weird, I know, stick with me here, but he kills James, and then James comes back to life, and he doesn't understand why is James coming back to life. And the more he tries to kill James, the more he realizes, okay, this is not working. And every cycle that goes through and resets, the storms get worse and worse and worse. And not only do they get worse and worse, they get shorter. And what does that remind you of in the Bible? Revelations, right? And one of the things I put in the storyline is that what gets Edwards kind of thinking more panicking, because as he's seeing these cycles and they get worse, he's thinking, oh my gosh, there's a storm that if this pattern continues, I'm not going to be able to survive. And so, and he comes to the conclusion that he has to solve this riddle with James, his most bitter enemy, to get to the ending of this island. And figure out, and that's the only way they're going to be able to escape it, because he's tried every other possible way to escape the island. He can't do it, and then he comes to the conclusion. But the problem is James has a real serious memory loss. Every time the cycle resets, James can't remember what has happened the last cycle. So his emotions and feelings of revenge always keep coming back, wanting to kill this pirate because he's always reset. And what we find out is Edwards is getting more and more aggressive in his tactics of trying to control the situation as the storms are coming. There's a guy named Jack Beckett, which is his quartermaster, and he first points it out to Edwards that, hey, I think we're in cycles, and that not only that, I read Revelations, and Revelations talks about birth pains and a great storm coming up. And I started writing the story. The skeleton was about 70 pages, And I started writing the story back in when I first broke my hand. And I was like, well, I'm going to need time to recover. And so I just, for 3 days, I sat there, not just writing it down, for 3 days in my dorm, didn't even move a muscle except to go to the bathroom. I just kept writing. And then I sent it to an editor, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this storyline. Long story short, she came on board. But I want to go back into the story real quick, because you got these two guys that now have to solve a riddle together, and the riddle is tied in with Solomon's gold. And literally the catchphrase of the book is if the bait is greed, then Solomon's wisdom is the hook. Solomon's wisdom in this book tells him how to get out of the storm. And I thought, you know what, we have a lot of all of this was conception, all this conception, you know, in the last, before I even heard about Joshua, I started writing about the storm, about how there's this great storm coming, and that people have a shot to, you know, and the cycles in their life, and then these guys in this case have to work together to get out of this storm. And the irony is, and I'm just going to tell you the rest of the book, is that what happens is they're in Davy Jones's locker. And the way they got in Davy Jones's locker is James, in real life, not real life, but in Davy Jones's locker is a spiritual world they're both in. And that's why these cycles can keep going over and over and over again. And it's a place of unfinished business where these two men have to come together, you know, and of course it's fiction, but it makes for a great story. But these two men have to come together, but then the way they got into there is that into Davy Jones's locker is James was riding his horse, because I'm a horseman, and his horse, he was running away from the British or the French or whatever it was, because he's a convict from the British, because at this point he failed in his career to capture Edwards, and so the king got really mad and put a warrant on him. He went to Virginia, and in Virginia he's kind of behind the whole Revolutionary War thing. He starts to be one of the key figures behind the scenes of pushing the tide in America's favor. But as he's pushing the tide in America's favor, England finds out that, oh my gosh, he's in the United States, and he's been running from us, from King George, because he failed. So George has a double. Yeah, George is really mad at him at this point, and George gets his army onto James, and James's horse, as he's running on his horse, a tree falls in front of him, his horse rears up, he gets knocked out, and they capture him. And so James is going to go to his trial in England now to be this unsuccessful pirate hunter that's now helping the American Revolutionary War effort. And so on his way on a ship back to England, he goes into this unconscious state. I don't want to say unconscious, but I want to say knocked out. He's knocked out, coma. That's the word I'm looking for. And in the coma, James, that's when he slips into Davy Jones's locker. And McMahon also slips into Davy Jones's locker at the same time. And that's when they have to work together to get it. And long story short, they both, in the end, have to, in the end, James's whole test is to forgive McMahon. Because James realizes that when he's healed of this trauma inside this island, that this is as fake as he thinks it is, because it's too hard for him to believe. Everything in this island is so real to McMahon, so you got two different realities going on. And then James comes to the conclusion that, and the only way they cannot avoid the storm. They cannot avoid the storm that's coming. Well, the storm is literally the seizures in his head. Every time he has a seizure, it's a storm in his head. Every time, and it just gets closer and closer to the point where he has to die. And that's the storm. That's metaphorical. This in his head. And so James comes to the conclusion that, you know what, as much as I want revenge, the only way truly to get out of here is there's two ways to get out of this place in my head. And he doesn't know it's his head. He comes to the conclusion that he's in Davy Jones's locker, a place of unspiritual business. And so James says, at the end of the book, James forgives McMahon, and as McMahon doesn't fully understand, he knows that things are going on. He doesn't know because McMahon has his own reality and perceptions. And in the end of the book, he ends up forgiving, not at the end of the book, in the middle of the book, he ends up forgiving McMahon, and that's all, and then dying, and then McMahon comes out of the coma himself, Edwards is McMahon. I'm sorry. I use McMahon a lot, but Edwards McMahon is his full name. So I'll just use Edwards just to make it simple for you guys. But Edwards comes out of the coma just as well, and he realizes that, and he ends up solving the riddle in his real career, and the riddle ends up convicting him that Christ is real, and that he gets the wisdom by through these coins, Solomon's coins. And that's you have to read about that in the book if you want it. But he gets the wisdom that he needs to find the real salvation, because he realizes that his own time is running up as well. And the storm was really the conviction for it all. And so what I found most interesting was that a lot of guys are coming up with this cruise things with the salvation thing and all of that stuff. And I just want you to know that this whole ship theme, God started this whole thing a long time ago, and I think he's only getting more and more intensified. I'm starting to see this more on people's posts, and I'm starting to see, ships and more, and I think we're here, guys. I think the storm is coming, and you and I, just like in my book, it's a riddle. It's a riddle, and we are getting through it, and I truly believe that the storm is here, and only a few of us are the dedicated, the few that are watching. We're gonna get out of here, and I don't even want to say that watching specifically, because I know there's gonna be tons of children that are not watching, and they're gonna be saved. They're gonna be saved. 5, 6, kids from in the womb right now, to when the rapture happens. Up to whatever age of accountability it's gonna be, and then none of them are watching. A lot of them are getting dreams and stuff, but you think they're paying attention to what Jesus is doing right now? I don't think so. But anyways, I do think that there's going to be a great, I do think the ship's coming, and you and I, there's a storm coming, and it's turning cold on us, and there's no way around it. And I think it's great to be, and I find this all very ironic. So to sum it up, I find that all these phases are actually purifying us, and there is a storm coming, and we're all choosing to jump on the ship. Hope you guys agree. God bless. This video's long enough. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. Oh, last thing before I go is I wanted to ask somebody if anybody is in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I got a really good deal here to work, but I'm looking for a place to right in the area, not 15-20 minutes max from Lake Hamilton area, because Oaklawn. If we end up sticking around longer than October, I'm looking for a place to put my trailer, usually at a ranch, or if anyone's got horses or whatever. I'm looking for a place to kind of park my trailer for a lot cheaper. It's expensive here, and I'm trying to get started off. I don't have a ton of money now, but once I start I start my job on Monday. If I could just get a little bit of a help finding a place temporarily until to park my trailer. I just need a plug-in, and that's really it. Please let me know. And I'm a pretty good horseman, so I know a lot of things about horses if you need the extra help. All right, thanks. Talk to you guys later. Bye.